proud of me. He said, son, I hope this has taught you a lesson. Little boy looks up at him all innocent-eyed and says, yes, it has. If you had given more, you would have got more.
Boy, you Baptist preachers, I'm telling you.
Well, we all got to give more, Malcolm. More than we thought we ever had to.
Yeah.
Sometimes, even that's not enough. What are we doing?
I think we ought to declare a winner.
If we can't have a truce, I suppose we ought to have a winner.
Oh, come on, Martin. We're arm wrestling. We're not running no relay races.
You warm up the way you want. I'll warm up the way I want. You know, whoever wins in here won't necessarily be the winner outside.
If I had thought that, I'd have invited you over here a long time ago, Martin. Look out, the old man's taking charge.
You didn't bring me here to have me turn around now.
Quoting scripture's not going to help you.
Can't hurt.
How long do you think we can continue this?
What?
I said, how long?
Not long. I'm willing to call it a draw if you are.
Okay, you stop first.
No, I'm from the country, Malcolm, but give me some credit.
All right, I'll count to 3. 1.
Wait, you gonna do all the counting?
All right, we'll alternate.
Well, no, they taught me in school that 3 is an odd number.
All right. I'll start, and then you go next, and then we'll finish at the same time. Agree?
Agreed.
1. I said 1.
2. No. 3.
Malcolm, is everything all right? We've been waiting for Dr. King.
Oh.
I guess I should be letting you go.
Yeah.
It's getting late.
I suppose so.
Rashad, would you give the doctor a hand with this coat?
Oh, no. Thank you. I can manage.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'll give you a hand with that. Rashad will accompany you downstairs, and we have a cart. They'll take you wherever you need to go.
I appreciate that.
You know, we could have made quite a team.
Malcolm, we do make quite a team. Most people just don't realize it, that's all.
Yeah. Well, may they stay ignorant just a little while longer, huh?
Oh, amen to that.
All praises to Allah.
Malcolm, do you want more time together to exchange prayers with your friend?
Rashad, I'm ready when you are.
I never meant to hurt you by anything I ever said publicly, Martin. It was very important to me that you know that.
It's important to me that you said it.
Well, at least we got to climb one mountain together, huh? Take good care of yourself, Martin.
Goodbye, Malcolm.
Malcolm, is there anything I can do? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Allah protect the dreamer. Hi, it's me. Yes, I'm fine. Are you okay? Betty, I'm sorry I can't be there with you, but you know that, don't you? Yeah.
Next week, when I speak at the Audubon, I want you to be there.
I want the whole family to be there. I'm going to speak on brotherhood. And then we'll spend more time together. Oh, yeah, I promise. Yeah, Betty. I love you. You don't know what love is. Until you've learned the meaning of the blues. Until you've loved the love you've had to lose. You don't know what love is. Let's go home.
The first time in 27 years. We are awaiting that, and we will have more of this special CNN report coming up right after this. Coverage of the release of Nelson Mandela from Victor Verster prison outside of Cape Town, South Africa. These pictures provided by South African Broadcasting. Let's bring Jonathan Mann, CNN's Jonathan Mann, back in. He's in Cape Town. Jonathan, what is the itinerary? Just go over it once again for any people, any of our viewers that may have just joined us. When he is actually released, which we should point out is some 42 minutes late at this point. When he is actually released, where does he go from there, and what's his itinerary for the next day or two?
Well, as you mentioned, he is running very late, and that throws his itinerary into some doubt. But according to what we have been told, he is scheduled to leave the prison any moment now. And from the prison gates, he'll be driven 35 miles into Cape Town, where in approximately 45 minutes from now, according to previously announced schedule, he is to address the media. He's apparently only going to make a statement and take a few questions. Apparently there is something he wants to say, but immediately after that, he'll be proceeding on to what is certainly the most important event of the day. That is, he'll be speaking to a rally of black South Africans who are gathering near the beach in Cape Town, waiting to hear from him. After that, he'll be spending the evening in Cape Town itself before returning to Johannesburg and his home in Soweto tomorrow or the day after. Many of the details of his itinerary have not been announced, and even more of the details are changing by the moment, because there was very little notice for the Mandela Release Committee, the group that's organizing things, there was very little notice to enable them to set up an agenda. They only found out 2 days ago that Mandela was being released. They were quite disappointed to not have had more notice, and they're quite busy now making plans, changing plans, crossing things out, adding them to the list. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of the things they've announced don't happen, and what we see is very different from the schedule that we've been promised.
Jonathan, we should point out also, and you can do that for us, even though we see a very tranquil scene here at the prison, South Africa is still under a state of emergency, and President de Klerk yesterday announced that basically we're going to have to wait and see what happens before relinquishing the state of emergency or suspending it.
Yes, you're right on both counts. From the look of it, you'd think things were very calm here, going well, everyone is delighted, and things have really changed. Things have changed in South Africa, but the most important things remain the same. The state of emergency is still very much in effect. The police have very broad powers of arrest and detention, and they are still taking on unarmed crowds of blacks who gather to demonstrate or to simply gather. De Klerk did say that he'd like to lift the state of emergency, but the government is very afraid that its powers will be necessary if there's some trouble. They're taking a big gamble by releasing Nelson Mandela. They don't really know how it's going to turn out. Mandela says, and they believe, and I think the world has reason to believe, that he is a force for peaceful change in this country, but things could get out of hand, and they say they need the state of emergency in place because they fear that if they repeal it, if the state of emergency is lifted and the government has to impose it again subsequently, all or much of the public relations gain that they are making in world opinion will be lost. South Africa will be seen to be stepping back rather than stepping forward. So they're keeping very much in control. Although they're slowly introducing changes, troops are still in the townships. There's some question about whether all people considered political prisoners will in fact be released. Not all have been promised release, and the state of emergency is still very much in effect.
Okay, Jonathan, we'll continue to elaborate on that state of emergency and what's going on, but let's, if we can, try to listen in here. As we said, the crowd has been fairly subdued. We did see about 15 or 20 minutes ago a person in the crowd who was actually in the center of that triangle right there, or in the center where the security forces are trying to rally the crowd on, but it has been very subdued. But let's listen in and see if we can get some of the color of what's actually happened as we anticipate the release of Nelson Mandela. We are sharing a satellite with South African Broadcasting, and that's Clarence Kiter, their correspondent. He's going to be popping up from time to time, and because of that sharing of the satellite. Again, 47 minutes ago, Nelson Mandela was to have been released from the Victor Verster prison. He has not been released yet. Our live special coverage of the release of Nelson Mandela will continue right after. 5 years ago, 2 years after entering prison in South Africa for his work with the African National Congress, which has now been legalized by President F.W. de Klerk, and the picture on the right was taken on Friday night after meeting with President de Klerk at Victor Verster prison, where we are awaiting, and the world is awaiting, the release of Nelson Mandela after 27 years in prison. Again, it has been delayed some 50 minutes or so. No reason, as far as we know, for the actual delay. CNN's Jonathan Mann is standing by live, as he has been for the last couple of hours, for the very latest on the situation in Cape Town. Jonathan, before we went to that break, we were talking about the security and the, in terms of what's going to happen after Nelson Mandela is released. Is there a great concern there that perhaps, as you well said earlier, that the security forces have not been noted for their restraint, that they may somehow try to precipitate violence to make this sort of a backlash against de Klerk in terms of releasing Mandela? In other words, as you well know, there was a demonstration, I guess 2 days ago, where members of the Western press were actually beaten during the demonstration. Is that a great concern there?
I don't think that if there is excessive violence, it will be directed from the top. The senior levels of the armed forces and, of course, the ministry that controls the police are very much, I think, on de Klerk's side. Things don't happen here without their opinions being taken into account, or at least them being informed ahead of time. If there's trouble, I do not believe it could possibly come from the senior levels of the armed forces or the police. But on a local grassroots level, the police have not been used to treating people gently. And individual policemen who have been enforcing apartheid bodily will certainly not dramatically change their views because one individual or one politician has told them to. Nelson Mandela does not change an individual policeman's life, nor does Frederick de Klerk's decision. And I think what we're going to see is simply the momentum of 40 years of repression carried on. I'm hoping that's not the case. Everyone here is hoping that's not the case. But certainly, police behavior does not change overnight. This is a country that for 40 years has been run on racism, and that racism is not evaporated. It's interesting to note that today, now, at a time when South Africa is probably seeing the most important event, or one of the most important events in recent history, South Africans are continuing their Sunday activities. The beaches here have people on them swimming. The restaurants are full of people, and Nelson Mandela is not dominating the ordinary life here. Things are not going to change dramatically either for ordinary people or for the police in any immediate way.
And I guess we should point out that this live picture from South African Broadcasting is being seen on CNN and worldwide. However, correct me if I'm wrong, on actual South African television, they have gone back to the regular programming now as they await since it has been delayed some 52 minutes, his release. Is that right, that the regular programming is on South African television now?
That's right. On one channel, viewers are being told with a slide, simply with words on the screen, special news broadcast follows shortly. They're being told on the same on another station in Afrikaans. And on the third, we're seeing some kind of broadcast involving a plane and an American actor. So they are not following this intensely. They may know about something we don't, about another delay. Certainly what we're having now is something that all the journalists have been living through in the last little while. We have been staking out the prison, in some cases during the day in the height of the heat, and in some cases at night at the height of darkness and cold, waiting for release. There have been rumors in the last weeks of release dates and of release times, and people have been staking out that prison in smaller groups than what you're seeing today. But we have been out there waiting, not knowing if he would be released. At least this time it's a bit easier. We have some indication that this is going, in fact, to be the day, even though we are now approaching 55 minutes of delay. He was supposed to be released 55 minutes ago. There has been no word that we have received that anything has gone wrong. We are still waiting for Nelson Mandela to be freed for the first time in 27 years.
Okay, Jonathan Mann, you have to stay right there because we're going to have more live coverage in our special report of the release of Nelson Mandela coming up right after these messages. A live picture of Victor Verster Prison outside the gates thereof, which you can see right in the center of your screen. Nelson Mandela was to have been released some 56 minutes ago. However, that release has been delayed for whatever reason, we're not sure. As far as we heard, last word from Jonathan Mann, there's been no word on why the release has actually been delayed. However, as far as we know, as far as logistics, Nelson Mandela will be coming in a prison van into that picture to about where that tree is on the right-hand side, that large tree. And then he apparently will be getting out of the prison van and walking through the gate. However, he will apparently already be a free man as far as prison security goes when he arrives at that tree and then makes the triumphant walk, if you will, outside the prison gates. As you can see, a lot of security forces standing around, but it's a very subdued crowd. We really don't have any estimates on the number of people actually out there, but we have seen some now legalized ANC. The African National Congress has been legalized by F.W. de Klerk in a speech last week, and those flags, those banners have been waving in the crowd outside, which you really can't see in this particular picture. But again, security will be actually the responsibility of the ANC and Mandela people once he actually leaves prison. And again, when he leaves prison, we don't know, but we're going to be back with more live coverage coming up from Victor Verster Prison right after this. I'm Patrick Greenlaw at the CNN Center in Atlanta. What you're seeing here is a live picture from South African Broadcasting of the Victor Verster Prison Farm, about 35 miles from Cape Town, South Africa, where Nelson Mandela will be released, or at least that's the last word we have from F.W. de Klerk yesterday, that he would be released about an hour ago. He was scheduled to be released. As far as we know, no particular reason why this release has been delayed, but again, there is the crowd awaiting the release of Nelson Mandela after 27 years in prison. Let's check in with CNN's Jonathan Mann right now for the latest on the events there. Jonathan, have you any update for us on the reason for the delay?
No, know, it remains inexplicable. I can't help you on that. We're all waiting and wondering. I think all of South Africa is wondering if it's just a small problem or if there's been some kind of setback. I can't imagine that having come this far, the South African government would in any way delay Mandela's release in an important way, but there could well be some kind of disagreement, some last-minute details to work out, because all of the details have been very rushed. There was very little notice for the Mandela Release Committee, the ANC group that's taking care of arrangements, and they complained that they really had very little time to throw things together. We could be seeing the result of that. Nothing very troubling about it. It could simply be that they're trying to arrange logistically for him to do something. We simply don't know. They've been very secretive for security reasons. They've also had very little to say because there have been many important arrangements they simply didn't know how they were going to make. We're seeing the result of that now. What we may be seeing more of in the days ahead is, in fact, a rift between the Mandela Release Committee and the Mandela family. We have no first-hand word of this, but there is in the press and a general feeling that the ANC has different plans for Mr. Mandela than his family does. And we'll be seeing exactly where he goes and what he does and what we see of Winnie Mandela by his side. She herself has been a very prominent personality, speaking in Mandela's name for years and years. But of course, it's been years since they have seen each other. 27 since he was put in jail, 31 since they were married. They were married in 1958, but he went underground in 1960 and was arrested in 1962. So his relationship with his wife, his relationship with his family over the last 27 years has not been an easy one. And seeing how he adapts to that, seeing whose hopes and plans he follows will be something for us to watch for ahead.
Okay, Jonathan, you stay on the phone if you would right there, because we have a guest in Washington, and she is the chief African National Congress representative to the United States, Lindwe Mabuza, and she joins us in our Washington studios. Good morning to you, ma'am. I hope I pronounced your name right. Is it Mabuza? Is that correct?
It was perfect.
Oh, thank you. Well, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What's your reaction to what you're seeing right now? What's in anticipation? Tell me what you're feeling.
I think, like the rest of my people, we are full of all kinds of emotions. It's a momentous occasion. It's phenomenal. And it's something that seems to come out of fiction more than reality. It's incredible. But, of course, we recognize that our people and the international community have worked consistently and relentlessly campaigning for the release of Nelson Mandela as well as all the other political prisoners. So in that sense, one has this sense of celebration because it's victory. We feel triumphant, and rightly so. We need to be jubilant and celebrate. But we celebrate with caution as well, because it's not all right. It's not all over. The release of Nelson Mandela does not remove anything out of the wall of apartheid. The other political prisoners are still behind bars. There are troops in the townships, and you have people being processed through more political trials for opposition to apartheid. The same apartheid that de Klerk now says is wrong, and yet people are going through the trials and going back to jail. So all of these obstacles should be removed before we can really say the atmosphere has been created for us and the other side to meet at a conference table.
Are you somewhat surprised, though, by the relative speed or the rapidity of the change in terms of releasing Nelson Mandela? Here's F.W. de Klerk, who's only been in power for some 7 months, and as we said earlier, it seems like he did more in 7 months than his predecessor, P.W. Botha, did in a decade.
Well, not really surprised, because in our reading of the situation, the release of Nelson Mandela was on the agenda from the time the P.W. Botha released Governor Mbeki in 1987. You will recall that Governor Mbeki stood in the same trial with Nelson Mandela with the same charges, under the same judge in the same court, and so they were sentenced to the same life imprisonment. So when Govan was sent out of jail,